Hello, Violet here, second generation homeschooling mom of 3. I have a 9-year-old, a 6-year-old, and a toddler. Today I wanted to do kind of a podcast style Q&A session. So thank you to everybody who submitted questions. We'll jump right into it. Our first question is, why did you decide to homeschool your kids? So I was homeschooled as a kid from 2nd grade through 8th grade, and then I went to a public high school. And my husband was also homeschooled. He was homeschooled for middle school, and then he also went to a public high school. And both of us had very positive homeschooling experiences, and the transition from homeschooling to public high school was really smooth for both of us. So when we started our family, I was pretty sure that I wanted to try homeschooling our kids. And then my daughter, the age that she is, she would have started kindergarten during the pandemic, so that was a no-brainer. We just started homeschooling her immediately, and it just went really well. So for me, I didn't really have a single big moment where I was like, this is the reason why I'm going to homeschool my kids. Some of the reasons why I really appreciate homeschooling are that, especially when the kids are younger, they have a lot more free time if you're homeschooling, as opposed to being in school from where we are, it's 8 to 3. There's no option for half-day kindergarten. You start right with a full day. And so especially in those younger grades, having a lot more free time and a lot more flexibility is just really valuable. In the future, we'll kind of just take it year by year. I do sort of tentatively plan to have my kids at least try public school for high school if they don't want to try it before then. Middle school can be kind of dicey, but for high school, that's kind of a inflection point where you have to decide, are you going to homeschool for all 4 years, or are you going to do public high school? If you don't go into public high school immediately, at least in our state, you'll have to repeat all the years that you were homeschooling. You just have to redo them. So kind of our tentative plan for the future is our kids will at least try public high school, and then we'll kind of see where that goes. And I'm definitely not opposed to public schooling if that looks like it's going to be the best option in the future. The whole point of homeschooling is doing what's best for my kids and providing them with something better than what they get at public school. So if we ever reach a point where I feel like I'm only providing something that's as good as or less good than the public school, then that would be a time to investigate the public school more closely. Our second question is, how did your homeschooling experience differ from what you're offering your kids? In a lot of ways, it's very similar. Obviously, I have access to more curricula now. We've had a lot of, especially secular curricula in recent years. There are a lot more options. So I'm not using a lot of the same curricula that I used when I was a kid. Some of the things are the same, but a lot of it is different just because we have different options now. But I think my core philosophy is fairly similar to my mom's core philosophy. And the reason why she'd initially pulled me out of school wasn't like an anti-public school thing or that she was necessarily upset with any individual thing that they were teaching me. It was more an academic rigor thing. So when I was in kindergarten and 1st grade, I was really into math, and I was asking for more advanced math homework, all of that kind of stuff. So she was expecting the school to offer more advanced work when I was clearly asking for it and ready for it, and they just completely refused. And on top of that, because I was academically minded and generally pretty good in class, they were sitting me with kids who were not good in class. And so it was just starting to really negatively impact me. Yeah, my mom could see that my level of learning was starting to die, and that was really not what she wanted. So she had never intended to homeschool. Both she and my dad had had really good public school experiences. They'd always been really strong supporters of the public school system. But by the end of 1st grade, it was becoming clear to my mom that where I was at was not a good fit. So she pulled me out. Anyway, all of that to say that I'm also homeschooling my kids because I think it's the best fit for them. And like my mom, I'm drawn to things that are academically rigorous. So my mom used Well-Trained Mind as kind of the basis for setting up her homeschool. And that's kind of what I'm doing too. I use it as a guide or for ideas if I'm kind of stuck about how to approach a topic. I don't follow it dogmatically. I don't consider myself a classical homeschooler, maybe classical-ish, but really more eclectic than anything else. I pull different curricula that I think is going to best suit our academic goals and our needs, and I don't worry about where it fits in the classical framework. And my mom was pretty similar as well. Although I have the benefit of having been homeschooled, and so I already kind of have a roadmap that I'm following. I kind of know what homeschooling can look like and what I think the best fit for our family will be, which is helpful. So question number 3 is, what about socialization? I see people asking this question all of the time. When people talk about this on YouTube, their answers are fairly nuanced, which is really good. But on Facebook, all the time, I'll see people just comment, well, kids in public school aren't well socialized, so don't worry about it. Or, I take my kids to the grocery store. They learn through real world interactions. And I don't love either of those responses. I think they're both very surface level and kind of problematic. Obviously, the people who comment things like that probably have a much more nuanced view of socialization than that quick comment offers, but I just wanted to take a minute to kind of talk about both of those perspectives. So for the first issue, while kids in public school might not be well socialized, that is true. But public school does offer you the opportunity to meet a lot of people. It gives you the chance to work with people who are different from you. And I mean, depending upon the area that you live in, hopefully in public school you're encountering a lot of people who think differently from you, are different from you, and you're just kind of learning to work through all of that and get along with people anyway. Obviously, that doesn't always work out, and I still think no matter whether your kid is in public school or homeschooling, you as the parent, you should be on top of your kids' socialization and their social skills and making sure that kind of all of that is developing as it should, that they're able to get the socialization that they need from the situations that they're in, that they have the skills and tools to deal with the situations that they're in. So yes, sometimes public schools are not great social environments, but that doesn't absolve homeschoolers of the responsibility to make sure that their kids have good social skills and are appropriately socialized and all of that. And then the second point, well, my kids learn through real life experiences like going to the grocery store. That's great. That is a part of socialization, is being able to act in a way that conforms to your area's social norms when you're out in public. But at least in my area, that is not, going out to the store is not a social experience. People do not talk to each other when we're out in public. I live in New England, and yeah, maybe you have a 2-line conversation with the cashier as you're checking out, but we are not standing around chatting to people in the grocery store. That would be very much at odds with the social expectations where we live. And so it is part of my kids' socialization to learn that this is the way we behave in a public space. We're considerate of other people. We make sure that we're paying attention to other people and we're not, crowding them. We're not being overly loud. We're not, again, talking about the grocery store, we're not knocking things over, standing people's way. All of that is part of socialization, but that's not really what people are talking about when they say, well, but homeschoolers aren't socialized. They're talking more about peer-to-peer interaction type stuff. And I do think that is really important. Obviously, one of the benefits of homeschooling is that kids also can have a lot more mixed age socialization, because out in the real world, you do have a lot more mixed age socialization. But I think peer-to-peer interaction is really important as well. That's one of the big reasons why we joined a co-op, which I'm going to talk about in a little bit. But I don't know, I do think that socialization can be a concern if you're homeschooling, and depending upon where you live, it can be difficult to find a good place to kind of fill that need. I know a lot of people will do classes and things like that. My kids do classes as well. But in those kind of very focused activities, there isn't a lot of room for socialization. Kids are there to do dance or gymnastics or whatever, and they might chit-chat a little bit, but a lot of the kids are very focused on whatever the activity is. So for some kids, that might be enough socialization, but for my kids, that definitely would not cut it. The other thing that a lot of homeschoolers talk about being amazing is park days. And again, I think this is going to be very area dependent. The area that we're in, we've attended some park days, and in general, the park days that we've attended have not had good regular attendance from families. So we never know who to expect when we go. And that makes it a little bit hard to build more long-term relationships. And so when I'm thinking about my kids' social needs, there's several different areas that I want them to kind of develop social skills in. One is those social skills in public, like how do we behave in public spaces, that sort of thing. That we can work on every time we go out. So that's not really an issue. The second area of socialization that I think about is interactions with friends. And so the friend relationship, your kid has to be able to find friends and develop that relationship, see those kids consistently enough that they become friends. And so my kids do have some friends that we've known for a long time. And so they can develop those kind of deeper relationships with them. They know what to expect when they go to their house. They know what kinds of things they're interested in. They go to their birthday parties, kind of all of that. And then the third area of socialization, and this is the one that I think it can be the most difficult to accommodate in a homeschooling environment, is learning to get along with people who are different from you. Depending upon where you're homeschooling, a lot of homeschooling circles are very homogenous. And so it can be hard to find places where you're interacting and your kids are learning to interact with people who are different from them. Whether that's just different personalities, different family styles, different religions, all of that. I do think learning to work together with someone who is very different from you, who maybe you aren't ever going to learn to be friends with, but you can still get along amiably and still work together in a, friendly manner. Kind of the adult version would be in a professional capacity. I think those skills are really, really valuable. And for us, that's one of the big reasons why we started looking for a co-op, is because I wanted to find a space that had a lot of different kids, a lot of different kinds of people, that my kids could get practice with those social skills. So that kind of leads me right into the next question. Question 4, how did you choose a co-op and find like-minded families? So when I was looking for co-ops, I was looking for spaces that prioritize being secular and inclusive of all kinds of people. And I was also looking for co-ops that provided mostly enrichment classes, because I wanted to handle the core subjects at home. Again, going back to that academic rigor, I knew what I wanted for those subjects. I have very specific goals in mind for a lot of our core subjects, and those aren't really things that I want to hand off to someone else. So the co-op that we ended up joining, the way that they do their new member enrollment is they have you come for a visiting day, so you can check out the flow of the co-op day, the vibe of the community, and make sure that it's a good fit for you. And I really appreciated that, because it really does help to ensure goodness of fit, both on your side and on the co-op side. There are other co-ops in our area. Some of them require you to sign a statement of faith. I was not looking for that. We are a family of faith, and I don't really ever talk about it on my channel because my faith is very deeply personal for me, and this is not a space that I want to share that in. Yeah, so if you're looking for a co-op, sit down and write out your list of what it is that you want from a co-op. So for us, it was that socialization and enrichment as opposed to core classes. And part of the whole enrichment class thing is that my kids are also getting some classroom experience. I don't want most of their schooling to be in traditional classrooms. That's one of the benefits of homeschooling, but I definitely don't think it's a bad thing for them to have experience being in a classroom run by someone who is not me, and having to follow classroom expectations and guidelines and things like that. If something changed in their situation and they had to go to public school, I would want their transition to be as smooth as possible, and part of that would be, if they already have some classroom experience, they know a little bit of what to expect. Although our co-op is in many ways a lot less structured than a public school, they still have, classroom expectations that they have to abide by when they're there. And I do appreciate that. Okay, question 5. What would you recommend for after schooling? So I don't have any experience after schooling. My kids have been homeschooled from the beginning, but what I would recommend for after schooling, just thinking of my own kids. Actually, first I should say both of my kids have sensory processing issues. So a full school day would be a lot for either of them to handle. I think they do fine. I think they do well. But coming home, they really would need space to decompress and get regulated again after their whole school experience. So I would only be looking for after schooling if I really felt there was something seriously deficient in the public school education, because they're already spending so much time at public school. And with the age that my daughter is at, she probably would have homework after school as well. So I would really only want to add a curriculum to that if I felt like what she was getting at public school was seriously deficient. And for me, that would really be kind of in the reading, the foundational areas, reading, writing, and math. If I felt like something was lacking in those, I probably would pull in some sort of curriculum to do for after schooling. And that would mostly just be the curriculum that I already recommend on this channel. So I really like reading reflex for phonics. For math, depending upon how severe it is, you could pull in a whole math curriculum, or you could do something like Kate Snow's Math Facts Stick series, which I really like if it's just that your kid is having trouble memorizing all of their math facts. That's a really good supplemental series. For something like writing, I imagine that the issue would be more that the school isn't providing enough scaffolding and support for the writing, and for that you probably would need to use something more specific to your individual situation. I really like the Writing Revolution. It's fairly adaptable, but it is a lot of work on the teacher's end. For other subjects like science and history, I most likely would approach those from a very casual angle. So building foundations of scientific understanding, which I love and we use for science, has a lot of suggestions for ways to bring up the science naturally in your day-to-day lives. I would probably approach it more from that angle, and then also incorporating science read-alouds, science documentaries, things like that. I don't think I'd go all in on a science curriculum, although my kids are very science-minded, so maybe I would be doing supplemental experiments and stuff. And then for history, same thing. I probably would be doing that mostly through audiobooks or read-alouds. So we really like History Quest. We're liking the last 2 levels of Story of the World. Story of the World is available on Hoopla, so you could very easily just pop that audiobook on while you guys are in the car or you're at home doing chores or whatever. For those kinds of subjects, I would be looking more for high input, low output kind of stuff. So your kid is listening to a lot of information, but you're not really asking them to produce anything because they already have the full public school schedule. I don't know, I just feel like I really wouldn't want to overwhelm my kids because they could very easily become burned out, and that I absolutely would want to avoid. Okay, question 6. What are your favorite and least favorite homeschool subjects to teach? Oh, this is a hard one. I like a lot of the subjects that I teach. I think it's really exciting to watch my kids learn and get excited about learning and about the things they learn. Really, anytime that my kids are making connections, I find that really exciting. But if I had to choose specific subjects, science and history are the most interesting to me. So I really enjoy teaching those. I like listening to, I mostly use the audiobooks for history programs just because then my daughter's not depending on me to read it out loud to her, although now she can read it herself if she needed to. But yeah, we really like the audiobooks for that, but I really like listening along with her. And I do pre-read a lot just so I make sure I'm ready for the week. I read a lot of the supplemental books ahead of time just to make sure I'm ready for the week. Same thing with science. I do all my planning ahead of time, but I really think history and science are really exciting and really interesting. And then least favorite subject. For me, that's probably teaching kids to read. Once they are finally reading, it's just so exciting. It opens up a whole world to them, and that's amazing. There's not really anything else quite like that. But the process of getting them there is so tedious. It's hard work to learn to read. You're rewiring your brain. And yeah, just as the teacher, it can be really, really tedious. With both of my kids, but especially with my daughter because I was pregnant with my son, I distinctly remember falling asleep while we were in the middle of a reading lesson and then waking up 20 minutes later, kids are gone, they've gone off to play, and the reading book is like sliding out of my lap. So the end result of all of that work is definitely worth it, but the actual process is not my favorite. I don't really dislike any of the subjects. I try to choose curricula that I also am excited to teach because I do think that is apparent to your kid. Whether or not you like the actual information, if the curriculum helps you be excited to teach it, that can really go a long way. Question 7 is, how do you choose curricula and how do you deal with FOMO? So I did a video flip through of a book called How to Homeschool the Kids You Have. I'll link that down below. But that book has a really clear and concise method for choosing curriculum. It talks about defining your academic goals. It talks about looking at the credentials of the person writing the curriculum. Do they have experience in a homeschool setting? Do they have content knowledge? Like if they're writing a science curriculum, do they have experience teaching science? Do they have a science degree? Like what is their background? Just kind of vetting your sources to make sure that the information is going to be quality information. It's going to be developmentally appropriate for your child. It's going to be presented in a way that is easy for you to teach and for your kid to learn from. Obviously, you're still going to need to alter things to best fit your family because there's no one-size-fits-all curriculum. But for a lot of families, things that are more open and go are going to be easier. They're more likely to get done if you're having a low energy day. And if you have something very clearly laid out, it can be easier to change the pieces you don't like than if you have something that's less detailed in its layout and then you're kind of having to add stuff. And then the other piece too is budget. When I'm looking at curriculum, I try to decide how much the extra bells and whistles are worth, essentially. So for example, for phonics, a lot of people really like All About Reading and Logic of English, and that's great. They're just too expensive for me and they have too many moving pieces, and I did not see the value for us in investing in those curriculum when I could get the job done really well with the much more inexpensive curriculum I had. I used Phonics Pathways for my oldest and then Reading Reflex for my middle. I love Reading Reflex, so that's the one that I would recommend. And yeah, it's a quality program. It's very inexpensive. So budget is definitely something that I consider when I'm looking at curricula because something can be super amazing but out of your budget. One of the things that I think about when I'm evaluating curriculum is how is it actually going to look in our day-to-day homeschooling, and is it something that we're going to be able to get done? The best curriculum for your family is the one that gets done consistently. It doesn't matter how amazing a curriculum is if you don't get to it or you get to it infrequently. That consistency is really what builds long-term academic gains. Obviously, there are curricula that are just not there in terms of academic rigor or presentation or whatever. They're just kind of full of nothing. But in general, most of the homeschool curricula that are popular, that you see a lot of people using, have content, they have substance. And so it's kind of a matter of weighing how well they match your family's style and whether you're going to be able to implement them easily and effectively. For me, one of the things that I always think about when I'm looking at curriculum is I prioritize efficient curriculum over fun curriculum, because just with my kids and me, our personalities, we all would much rather spend 5 minutes doing a boring but straightforward grammar lesson than spending half an hour doing a cutting, pasting, quote unquote, fun grammar lesson. My kids are very literal thinkers and they also hate glue. any of those lap book type things. They absolutely hate them. So a lot of the things that Curricula use to kind of dress subjects up as fun, they already don't like. If you choose a curriculum that is more efficient, you then have all of those other 25 minutes that you didn't spend on that to do whatever you want with. And I do think that's more valuable for us. That's one of the reasons why I value our homeschooling, is that my kids have free time to explore their own interests, whatever those may be. So that's kind of some of the things I think about when I'm choosing curricula. How do I deal with FOMO? FOMO, for those of you who are not familiar with this acronym, it's fear of missing out. And this applies in homeschooling spaces when there's a new shiny curriculum. Suddenly everybody's talking about it, and you're looking at your old curriculum going, well, maybe this new one is better. So for me, this is not something I struggle with a ton. I definitely do get attacks of FOMO from time to time, but in general, I've done enough research that I'm pretty solidly set with the choices that I have, and I've already invested money in the curriculum that I have. So if I'm switching to a new curriculum, I have to have a rock solid reason, whether it's the old curriculum I have is not working for my kids. For example, I recently switched my son to Beast Academy, even though I already have all of the teacher guides for Singapore for the grade levels that he's using. Beast Academy is a much better fit. And so I had a very clear reason for switching him from one to the other. It wasn't just, oh, this looks cool and fun and exciting, let's switch to this. I knew that based on the kind of learner he is, Singapore was not currently meeting his needs, and Beast Academy looked like it would. And so far it's been going really well. And so when I'm looking at something new, I ask myself, is it really worth the money? Is it that much better than what we have? And usually the answer is no. I do find myself looking kind of the areas that I get FOMO in the most are the areas that I am least confident in teaching. And it's helpful for me to know that about myself, because really what I need is not more different kinds of curricula. It's to go read about how to teach those subjects. So for me, it's writing. I'm always kind of second guessing how I teach writing, even though my kids are doing really well. It's just something that I feel like is a very big subject to tackle, and I'm not as confident in teaching it as in other subjects. And so whenever I start to look at new writing curricula, I kind of have to remind myself, no, you don't need a new curriculum. You need to go read about how to teach kids writing. You need to go read about the developmental stages in writing. You need to go read about what good writing is, things like that. Another thing to think about too is if you're curriculum hopping a lot, you can inadvertently have gaps in your kids' foundations. A lot of curricula approach topics in slightly different orders, and so if you are switching between them, it's just something you have to be aware of. It's not the end of the world, but you may have to go back and fill something in. And if you just stick with one curriculum all the way through, if it's a well put together curriculum, they should cover everything by the time you get to the end. And so you don't have to worry about that as much then. And I do value that peace of mind in knowing that if I stick with one math curriculum all the way through, we'll cover everything we're supposed to have covered in Singapore goes up to 6th grade, Singapore primary. Everything we're supposed to have covered in kindergarten through 6th grade, we'll have covered it. We'll be ready to move on to whatever the next step in math is. Question 8, why did you start a YouTube channel? I do appreciate when creators are transparent about why they're doing what they do. So for me, I started watching a lot of homeschool YouTubers, secular homeschool YouTubers specifically. And this was before we joined our co-op, so I didn't know a ton of homeschoolers in real life. I knew even fewer homeschoolers who are trying to use secular curricula. But a lot of the homeschoolers that I meet just homeschool in a different way than we do, which is totally fine. But it meant that I didn't have very many outlets for discussing a lot of the curricula that I was interested in. And so I turned to YouTube to start consuming that kind of content. I started to feel like I had a lot of things to say. And so I thought about it for a while. I'm a pretty methodical person in general. I definitely tend toward overthinking. So I thought about it for a while, and then I decided I did actually feel like I had things to say that were constructive and hopefully helpful to everybody who watches my videos. So my main goal is really to make content that is the sort of content that I would want to watch. So that's the library hauls that I do are really fun for me to film, but they're also the sort of thing that I really like to watch. And then the other goal that I have is for my content to be helpful. I try to really only produce content that I think might be helpful to someone, which I hope comes through in my videos. And also they're fun for me. If they ever started to feel like a burden, I would stop doing them. If there's a particular video that you would like to see me film, definitely let me know down below. I'm always open to suggestions. Question 9 is, how do you organize all of your library books? Yeah, so we do check out a lot of library books. I have more than 100 checked out right now. I think I have like 114 library books checked out right now. And I'll put some pictures up on the screen. Our library storage system has grown slowly through the years. It's probably not the best storage system, but it has worked for us. We've never permanently lost a book. We've always managed to find them eventually. So the first part of our library system, and this is what we started with way back when we first started homeschooling, this is a repurposed laundry cart. And I don't know how well you're going to be able to see it in the picture, but there are wire bins on each shelf because the laundry cart is not, like the edges of it are not tall enough to keep the books in. So I found these bins that are the right size. I think someone was like throwing them away and I picked them up, but they fit in this laundry cart perfectly. And so the top shelf is all of my daughter's stuff that she checks out for her personal reading. The middle shelf is school books. So right now it's Fish Tank ELA stuff. And then the bottom shelf is my son's stuff. Oh, and this bag hanging off the end is where my kids put books that they're ready to return. And for a long time, this is the only piece that we had. But as all my kids have gotten older, we've needed to add more sections to our library storage. So that 3-tiered thing is on one side of our couch. On the other side of the couch is this basket shelf situation. So this basket is a basket that somebody gave me. And this right now has all of the history and science supplemental books that my kids can pick from to read each day. For a long time, this was just our picture books, all of them, whatever didn't fit on the 3-tiered shelf. But we recently were gifted this display shelf. And so I've started putting all of our non-school related picture books on it. If they fit, sometimes they don't fit. But I try to put them all on here so that it's really easy for my kids to see what we have checked out, and especially my youngest can grab what she's interested in for story time. And then back in the corner here, this is overflow. It's kind of neat right now, but sometimes it's just a jumbled pile of stuff, whatever doesn't fit in the other places. Again, this is not the world's most amazing library book system. It's just what works for us right now. Honestly, the biggest thing that has helped our library system is just teaching my kids how to use it. If they want to read a library book, that's amazing. Pick it up, read it, but when you're done, you have to put it back. Because if it doesn't get put back, then when it's due at the library, we're scrambling to find it. So just getting my kids in the habit of when they're done reading a book, they put it somewhere. It doesn't even have to be in the right spot. It just needs to be somewhere in this library situation. And then also every day at the end of the day, we go through and pick up all the random library books that didn't make it home and put them where they go. Question 10, what do you do when you're sick? Nothing. I don't do anything when I'm sick. Obviously, it depends upon how sick we all are. But if we're really sick, we don't do anything. We just take a break. One of the things that I'm teaching my kids, hopefully with homeschooling, is how to take care of themselves. And part of that is knowing when it's better to rest than to do anything else. So if I or my kids are really sick, school doesn't happen that day. We just do it later. We'll make it up another day. If my kids are just kind of sick, like they have the sniffles, but they're otherwise full of their regular amount of energy, we just do school like normal. Maybe we won't go to activities if we're starting to show kind of cold symptoms or feeling just a little bit under the weather. But in general, if they have a normal amount of energy, we do school. And then if it's kind of in between where they're feeling a little bit down, but they could do some school, then we'll focus more on the high input, low output subjects. So read alouds, the subjects that they're really excited about, like science for my daughter. Unless she's really sick, she's always up for doing science. History, things like that. But we may hold off on math or writing or something that's a little bit more mentally intense for my kids. Question 11 is, what do you use to organize podcasts and audiobooks for your kids? So we do have a CD player. We don't really use that for podcasts and audiobooks. That's more for physical CDs, which yes, we do still have physical CDs. They're a lot easier for really little kids to manage. I have all of the Jim Weiss CDs that I listened to growing up. My mom gave them to me when I started homeschooling. And then we've acquired other CDs through the years as well, like different music CDs, or our Whistle Fritz that we have for French and Spanish has some CDs with it. And we also check out a lot of CDs from the library. For audiobooks, if it's something that we're all listening to together, I'll usually just pull it up on my laptop. For everything else, I have an old cell phone. I've deleted pretty much everything I can delete from it, and I've disabled a lot of the apps that I can't delete. So like Google Play Store, you can't delete from an Android phone, but you can disable it so it doesn't show up. So if my kids knew how to navigate the phone's menu, and they probably could figure it out if they were motivated, they could figure out how to turn it back on, but it's not popping up in general. The only apps that they have access to are the clock, the calculator, a white noise app that I downloaded, Libby, and then Pocket Casts. Notes, which is what I use to organize podcasts. So for Libby, they use my account so I can see like what they're listening to and what they're checking out. And they also, kids library card holders can't have Libby accounts. I think you have to be at least 13 or something. But we all just use my Libby account. So then I can check stuff out for them and I can keep track of what they're listening to and everything. And then for podcasts, Pocket Casts doesn't have like parental controls or anything. You can just freely search. But my kids don't, mostly because I've loaded tons of podcasts that I think they would be interested in, and I know that they're all kid-friendly and appropriate and all of that onto the Your Podcasts page. And so it shows up, I'll put a screenshot up, but it shows all of the podcasts as little icons. They can click on them and listen to them. And so they have no desire to explore other parts of the podcast. They just always go to this page and choose what they want to listen to. And there's a lot of stuff on here that I've loaded on here that they haven't listened to yet just because they haven't gotten there. But it doesn't have parental controls, so theoretically your kid could search for whatever. But again, this is an app that they're using my account, so on my phone I also have it, and so I can see what they're listening to. But I've also been very clear with my kids what the limits around using this phone are. Like if they try to download games onto it, or if they try to watch videos or access the internet on the phone, they will no longer have access to it. It really is just for listening to the podcasts that I've chosen for them and listening to the library books that I've chosen for them. And they've never had an issue with that. That's worked really well for us. All right, and then the last question that I have for us today is, what are your 3 best curricula and worst curricula? I'm going to approach this more in terms of what are 3 curricula that worked really well for us, were a good fit for us, and what 3 curricula were a really bad fit for us. And the curriculum that are a bad fit, I don't think are bad curricula. They just really didn't work well for us. So I guess I'll start with the worst and we'll end with the best. We'll end on a good note. So the 3 curriculum that really didn't work well for us are Curiosity Chronicles, and I've talked about this before. I really wanted to love Curiosity Chronicles. I think it's a really good curriculum, but the style of it just didn't work for us at all. My kids have sensory processing issues. The back and forth dialogue style of the audiobook requires a lot of additional auditory processing above and beyond a regular audiobook, and it just was way too overwhelming for them. And then just reading the text without having it be a dialogue was too dry. They were not getting anything from it. Now that they're older, they might have less of a problem with it, but they have such a negative association from trying it out a little bit when they were younger that they just absolutely won't engage with it at all, which is a bummer, but that just is how it goes sometimes. Another curriculum that just was a really poor fit for us was I did actually try Michael Clay Thompson briefly. I tried the very first Poodle book in the Poodle level, and I don't think the Poodle level is a good representation of what the higher levels of the curriculum are, but I really didn't like it. I thought it was very, very expensive for what you got. It was essentially a cute story introducing all the different parts of speech, but the story was told by someone who thinks they're very clever and they're very clever because they can use very big words. And so my daughter thought it was funny, but the whole point of the story just went completely over her head. She and also I prefer curriculum that's much more straightforward and to the point. So she liked listening to the Poodle book, but she just didn't get anything from it. Even when we did the exercises and activities, it just didn't stick at all. And again, it's really, really expensive for what you get. So we resold that one pretty quickly. And then the last curriculum that was a poor fit is probably Song School Spanish. And that one was a poor fit for the very specific reasons that I'd purchased it, thinking it was going to be a good fit. That was more of a me thing than the curriculum thing. But Song School Spanish is designed to use songs to introduce vocabulary. It's vocabulary in isolation, essentially. So you'll have a sentence where most of the sentences is in English and then one word will be in Spanish. And so you pick up some vocabulary that way. And my daughter hated it. She thought it was such a waste of time. She wanted to learn to be able to say the entire thing in Spanish. And so I realized very quickly that it was not going to work for us. I bought it because it was a lighter approach, because she was already doing Chinese. This was the first year that she was doing her in-person Chinese school. And then we were also doing sign language, just with videos online. And so she'd asked to add Spanish as well, and I didn't want to overwhelm her. But that approach was just a really bad fit. So we switched, after looking around a ton, we ended up switching to flip-flop Spanish, which we did for a little bit, but then she got overwhelmed and we cut it. Again, I don't think Song School Spanish is a bad curriculum. It's very clear and upfront about what it is, and you know what you're getting when you get it. So I don't have any complaints about it. It just wasn't a good fit for us. And that's true of all the other curricula too. And then best curricula. Again, this is going to be really subjective. What's worked really well in our house? Most of the things that we've used have worked really well, but the curriculum that I really love is Building Foundations of Scientific Understanding. And this is one that works so well for us, but I know I can't just give a blanket recommendation for it because it's the sort of curriculum that is not going to work well for plenty of people. It's not super open and go. You do have to be confident in teaching science or be willing to put in the work to getting yourself to that point and being more confident in teaching science. I have a STEM background. My husband does as well. He's taught math and science for years in various capacities. So I'm really comfortable with using Building Foundations of Scientific Understanding, and I really love how it approaches science, how it gently encourages kids to observe and engage and be curious, but it also doesn't expect them to know things that they don't have the background knowledge to know yet. It's a good balance between those two things. I really like how it weaves all the topics together. Yeah, I just really like BFSU. Another best curriculum for me would be Artistic Pursuits. My kids have really liked Artistic Pursuits. I really like how it's laid out. It's very, very easy for my kids to do it completely independently. I just really like how it moves through art history chronologically, how it introduces all sorts of different art mediums. We're using the K-3 level still, so it's gently introducing some of the fundamentals of art. So having it all laid out for me just means that we actually get to it every week. I don't have to think about it. It's just all done for me. So yeah, I really, really like Artistic Pursuits. And then the last curriculum that has worked really well for us is Reading Reflex. I just really love the speech to print approach to learning phonics. It's still systematic, but it just is more intuitive. It's faster getting the kids from when they're learning the initial sounds to being able to start to read things. It was more fun to teach. I felt like it was less tedious than I'd used Phonics Pathways before. Phonics Pathways is print to speech, so everything is organized by spelling patterns, and yeah, that just ends up feeling really tedious really quickly. And also, I felt like with Phonics Pathways, my daughter's ability to read, once everything started clicking, it started to quickly outpace the things that she was learning in her phonics program, so it was not going quickly enough for her. And I did not feel that way about Reading Reflex. I feel like Reading Reflex is much easier to match to where your kid is at and speed up or slow down to meet them exactly where they're at. And it's scripted in a way that Phonics Pathways isn't. Phonics Pathways kind of just gives you the pages and doesn't really give you any direction. Reading Reflex tells you exactly how to teach every lesson. Yeah, I just really, really liked Reading Reflex, and it's so inexpensive. So highly recommend that one. That's all I have for today. That ended up being a lot longer than I anticipated. I guess I had a lot more to say than I thought I did. So if you made it all the way to the end, thanks for sticking with me. If you have any more questions in the comments down below, I would love to hear from you. I hope you found this helpful. As always, I will link anything that I mentioned in the description box. I am an Amazon and a Bookshop affiliate, so if you click on one of those links and make a purchase, I do receive a small commission. Thank you for watching.